Hi, Tim. It's Carol Ann. Welcome to our Social Procurement Summit. And you have the floor now for the next 45 minutes. And the only thing that is in between you and the end of your presentation now is if anybody needs to get up and stretch their legs. So we have undivided attention, I do believe, for the next 45 minutes. So over to you to talk about turning on the social power on your construction project. Would you like questions throughout your presentation, if there's any, or at the end?
I think at the end,
Okay.
and I actually have a video, actually a couple of videos that I use in my presentations. I just got to quickly check this because we didn't have a chance to do it before. So let me just try this.
Grand.
Does that work?
Yep,
Okay,
that
cool. All right, go
works.
back up to the
Okay.
top here. Okay, sorry about that, folks. I just had to get squared away. So it's great to be here today. Thanks for providing me the opportunity to speak. I'll just introduce what I want to do is I want to tell you a little bit about myself and our company very quickly. Then we'll step into a presentation that I give quite a bit, and it's to clients who are interested in social procurement. So the front piece is going to be maybe 10 minutes around the why. And then I'd like to spend a good 15, 20 minutes or so walking through a case study of a project that we're doing in Vancouver. It's been in the works for quite a long time. We're working with Bisocial Canada on it. And I think the idea is to go from the why to the how as part of my presentation here. So with that, I'll jump in, and we're going to have time for Q&A at the end. We got about 15 minutes or so at the end, I expect, for Q&A. So as I mentioned, my name is Tim Coldwell. I'm the president of Chandos Construction. We are a purpose-driven national technical builder that's leading change in the Canadian construction industry. We're also the world's largest B Corp certified contractor. Score is about 108, and we have some aspirations of increasing that significantly here this year. I would say 4 or 5 years ago, most of our clients didn't know what a B Corp was. These days, about 1 in 3 know, and it's a significant differentiator for us. We're also the only contractor in Canada that's made a public commitment to net zero by 2040. And when we say this, we mean our supply chain, not just our own footprint, but including our subcontractors. And my personal story is I don't know where I would be if Chandos didn't give me a chance. I've been with the organization since I was 17, turning 18. Um, and frankly, I was going to be in a cardboard box on the street. I found a second family and a sense of purpose and a community in the construction industry that's driven me over the years. I'd also say I'm a member of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte. I didn't grow up in community, but got reconnected to my Indigenous roots later in life. And it's been a very moving journey for me. It's just really interesting how Indigenous ways of being have been around for millennia. And now business people are just starting to wake up to these concepts that have been around for since the beginning of time, essentially. And one of those concepts is this idea of collective decision making, and that connects to our company. We're 100% employee owned. I run around with a fancy title as the president, but I really work for the people who are doing the work: project managers, estimators, carpenters, laborers in the job site. Less than 30% of the equity in our company is controlled by executives. And that really drives a different behavior in an organization. We're not working for the man, we're here working for each other. So it's really defines our culture as an organization. One of my business idols is Yvon Chouinard from Patagonia. And he's got this saying that says, to do good, you actually have to do something. And I hope that's what Chandos is known for. We like to move from the concept to action as quickly as possible. I also like kind of the edginess that Patagonia has. They're known for doing these sorts of things. And I think we as an organization also are not shy to take a poke at folks to, kind of have the tough conversation around the things that need to occur in industry. Just in terms of why, let's just call it social purpose matters. Just a few stats that I always like to put out here. 87% of employees do not feel a sense of purpose in their day-to-day work. So that really, just think about that. That means that only about 13% of the people that you have working for you actually love their job. And what if we could move that to, 23% or 33%? You want to talk about winning the war for talent, it starts to revolve around those sorts of things. Two other stats, 64% of those born between 1980 and 1995 won't take a job if an employer is not socially responsible. And for Gen Z, 85% of those born between 95 and 2010 believe companies have a moral obligation to solve social issues. And let me just say that again, a moral obligation. That's a really interesting concept. And this is a big issue in Canada. With the aging workforce, 46% of Canada's construction industry is expected to retire by 2030. That's data from Stats Canada. There's about 1.5 million people in the Canadian construction industry, and RBC's latest forecast suggests that 700,000 will retire by 2030. And when was the last time you talked to a 13-year-old kid who's excited about being a plumber or an electrician? So there's an opportunity here for us to solve our labor crisis in the construction industry through social procurement. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit. One of my favorite sayings is one from Henry Ford here, and he said, "If I asked customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse." And one of the things that Chandos does as an organization is we advocate for new professional services in the construction industry. And we do it in a way that's very aspirational around where the industry can go and how we can have a positive impact in the world. We've worked extensively with Buy Social Canada over the years. They're certainly the leaders in this space. We talk about things not just like social procurement, but things like emissions from buildings. 28% of Canada's GHG footprint comes from emissions from the built environment. 11% of it today is embodied carbon in construction. And if you dig in on embodied carbon, there's three big offenders: concrete, steel, and aluminum. To put a point on this, we've made a commitment to be net zero by 2040. And that means in 2040, I need to buy concrete, steel, and aluminum with zero embodied carbon. That technology actually exists today. It's just a matter of how quickly can our industry move in that direction. One of the other things that a lot of folks don't talk about in North America is forced labor in the construction supply chain. And so if you walk into Home Depot, I will guarantee you that in some of the raw materials that you're buying, there will be materials that were produced somewhere in the world with forced labor. And the latest estimates are that 6 million people per year are used to produce used to produce raw materials that are used in the North American construction supply chain. And so that's just a really impactful stat that sticks with me. One of the other opportunities to have an impact as a contractor is around construction waste. This is data from the US, but the Canadian data is very comparable. About 30 to 35% of all the garbage that's in landfills comes from construction sites. And Chandos as an organization has been diverting construction waste since the early 2000s. We've diverted, on average, 80% of our entire enterprise waste stream over that period of time. It doesn't cost us anymore to do that. So that's just an example of how you can have an impact as an organization. So I'm going to shift to social procurement and just unpack this concept a little bit. So really, it's the intersection of local community needs and the project's buying power, and this idea of how can the project benefit local community. The best example I have of this is a partnership that Adidas had with Parley for the Oceans. I think some folks may know about this, but the short story is that Parley for the Oceans was a small NGO, literally fishing plastic out of the Pacific Ocean and recycling it, taking it back to shore. And Adidas partnered with them and said, well, what if we made shoes out of ocean garbage? And so the shoes on the screen here are made out of 11 bottles fished out of the ocean, the white soles. And they started out, frankly, as a little bit of a marketing ploy, and they thought they might sell 400,000 pairs of shoes or something like that at $300 a pop American. And today, 6 years later, they've sold something like 44 million pairs of these shoes and have helped scale Parley to be one of the largest recyclers of ocean plastic in the world. And you do the math on that. That's a huge incremental revenue and income to Adidas because of their leadership around an issue. And so that's a great example of impact. They've actually evolved the technology and have developed a circular economy shoe as well as fabrics that are used. And so the latest thing that they've got out is it retails for $700 a pop American. But they ship you a pair of shoes that are made 100% from plastic, fished from the ocean. You wear them, you get through the life of the shoe, you put them in the prepaid bag, postage prepaid bag, you ship it back to Adidas, and they grind it up and they make a new shoe. So they're never using fresh hydrocarbons. Check it out.
If we can see things for what they are, if we can see what they could be, if the plastic we use, we never throw away, if the end of one thing could be the beginning of the next. If we know that less can create more. If we can return, we reciprocate, we regenerate. If we are here for others, if we can work as a team, all we have to do is connect, and the world opens up. The future is about giving back.
So the line in there that always sticks with me is the future is about giving back. And I really think that that is the future for business leaders. Michael Porter is a famous professor, and he advocates for businesses to have a social purpose and suggests that that is the largest differentiator that you can have as a business. And I totally agree. Peter Diamandis, the X Prize guy, is famous for this saying, the world's greatest social problems are the world's greatest business opportunities. And I think we forget that as business leaders. I could talk about this slide for hours, but I've got time limitations here. But I think just kind of the progression of the doing well by doing good movement. I mentioned Michael Porter, starts with Michael Porter. He started to talk about shared value later in his career. In 2007, Andrew Kasoy, Bart Houlihan, and Jake Cohen Gilbert founded B Labs in the United States. And frankly, I think mainstream business leaders looked at Porter and the B Labs guys as kind of like hippies over on the side. That's not mainstream. I don't know what's going on over there. We're Wall Street, we're Bay Street, we're going to do our own thing. In 2009, Paul Pullman placed sustainability at the center of Unilever's strategy, and people started to pay attention. I think they still kind of had some suspicion around like, what's this whole ESG conversation about? In 2018, it really got broken open with Larry Fink from BlackRock. They're the world's largest manager of institutional investments, probably the largest institutional investor, something like 9 trillion of assets under management, mostly publicly traded companies. And he basically told the CEOs of those publicly traded companies, I'm not asking, I'm telling. I expect you to have a social purpose. I expect you to have a higher return and be more profitable because you have a social purpose. And if you push back on me, we're an activist investor. We'll change your board. We'll change your board. We'll fire you as the CEO. So that got a lot of attention on Bay Street and Wall Street and started this absolute stampede around businesses, particularly publicly traded businesses, really focusing on ESG. I did a speaking event, and David LePage and Elizabeth Chick Blount helped me set this up. But I did this talk with Adair Fox Martin, who was on the board of SAP, and she had this great saying that is just stuck in my mind. The chief procurement officer must become the chief purpose officer. And I think there's so many executives running around prattling on about purpose, but their actions of the organization don't actually align with what comes out of their mouth. And I think customers pay attention to that. I think your employees pay attention to that. I'm going to play a very brief clip here from Bill George, the past CEO of Medtronics, who wrote a great book called True North. And he talks about the importance of being authentic as business leaders.
There's a big change taking place in CEOs today because they have the courage to stand up for what they believe in and be outspoken about. There was a time when everyone kind of hunched down and didn't hunker down and didn't want to say anything and go below the radar screen. Now I think they feel it's so purposeful. I'll give you an example of someone who did that. Ken Frazier CEO of Merck, was so offended by President Trump's comments after Charlottesville that he resigned from his council. And he now didn't do it quietly, he put out a statement. And you realize that everything Merck does, their whole purpose is often dependent on approvals from the US government for every new drug, quality, pricing. And so it is an example of extreme moral courage. But I think more and more CEOs are having the courage to find their voice and stand up for what they believe in. Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, stands up and says he will not accept what's going on in Indiana or North Carolina with discrimination against people that are LGBTQ. And so he has that courage to find his voice. Mark Benioff, the same way, at Salesforce. And I have such admiration. If your company has a purpose, you've got to stand up and be counted. You've got to say, this is wrong. And so I think you have to find your voice and have that courage. Do the right thing. Do you take a risk? Absolutely. But if you don't, the greater risk is that you don't believe in anything and your employees watch what you do. After the Parkland shooting, you know, what's your feeling about guns? I want a safe neighborhood. I want safe kids, safe schools for our employees' kids to go to school in, my own kids. And I want it to be a safe place. So that's a community question. Our community's got to come together and ensure the safety of our young people. If we don't, who will?
You know, and a lot of people would say, you see the, air quote backlash that's going on, particularly in Florida and Texas, around companies that are taking a social stand. My response to that, I don't care. At the end of the day, customers want to buy from people that their value align with. And there are more than enough customers out there who want to buy from an organization that has the sort of values that Chandos expresses. And I think that's the point that Bill George is saying, is you can't be all things to all people. You actually have to take a stand and you have to take a choice. And you're going to lose some employees, you're going to lose some customers. But at the end of the day, you got to be authentic. And I think that's really important. Through our work with Bisocial Canada, there's been a lot of change that's happened in the Canadian construction industry. And I'd say Bisocial is taking the lead here. These are the old mandate letters from the previous Liberal government, but social procurement, Indigenous reconciliation, right in the mandate letters. They continue to be in today's mandate letters as well. Over the years, there's been something like 120 organizations that I am aware of that have a social procurement policy, a public policy that says, as an example, 20% of the selection criteria when selecting a contractor or a designer on a major infrastructure project will be based on that contractor or designer's ability to have a positive social impact in the local community through the construction spend. And I think that's very transformative. This is not just a thing that's going on in the public sector. It's actually been going on in the private sector for quite some time. There's a group in the US called the Global Impact Sourcing Coalition that is founded by mostly tech companies. And for years now, they have been putting social impact as part of the selection criteria when hiring a contractor. We have an NDA on this, so I can't mention the client's name. There's a major data center outside of Calgary. It's a campus, actually. It's going to be a couple $1 billion. And a large technology company from San Francisco is putting 35% of the selection criteria for their general contractors based on what social good can occur in the local economy through the money that they're going to give those contractors. And so when folks ask me, like, okay, I get this concept, I get the idea of impact and social purpose. How does that actually work in the construction industry? The best way I have to describe that as a general contractor is we sit at the center of a web between clients and designers, suppliers, subcontractors. We hire a ton of people. And to me, the main lever that we have as organizations are these massive supply chains. Chandos has a backlog of about 1.2 billion. We have 800 employees. We have a lot of influence in terms of who gets hired for our project, both in terms of people and as well as businesses. And so to really put a point on it, we can hire anyone to push a broom for us. We pay a living wage, so call it $20 an hour, depending on where the market is. We can hire anyone to push a broom for $20 an hour. Let's hire the at-risk youth who's riding the bus 3-4 hours a day back and forth to high school, working 2 minimum wage jobs, trying to put food on the table for a brother or a sister because mom and dad aren't around. Let's hire that kid and put that individual in our apprenticeship program. And we pay, and pretty much every major general in Canada pays for their employees to go through an apprenticeship program. And we lay them off. We do top up when they're in trade school, and then they get their hours when they come back. But an apprentice carpenter makes, I don't know, something like 25 bucks an hour, depending on what year it is. And in Toronto right now, it's $51 an hour straight time for a Red Seal carpenter. So we can take someone who is on a path towards crime and or poverty and give them a high paying job in the construction industry in a matter of 4 or 5 years. And it costs us nothing to do this. We're going to hire those people anyways. I've done a lot of work with United Way over the years, and they've got a ton of research that would suggest for every dollar invested in poverty reduction, there's a $3 savings to the Canadian social system. So if you just unpack this idea of impacting an at-risk youth, if that individual was headed towards needing the supports of the social system, that's about a $300,000 expense when you take a look at the salary. So another way of saying it is we're creating a job that pays $100,000 a year. That individual will pay taxes. And if that person was headed towards needing social supports, we're avoiding costs of about $300,000 a year for the Canadian social system. That's a $400,000 swing per person we can impact. And we have aspirations of impacting hundreds, if not thousands of people as we grow our business. Here's an example of what this looks like in practice.
So right now I'm continuing with my apprenticeship to get my Red Seal, which is a 4-year program. And then I'm wanting to get into eventually project management.
It's my first year apprenticeship for carpentry. I've been with the company for roughly just over 10 months now.
And my overall goal after I become a journeywoman is to go back and mentor the children, the youth, and women or anyone in the reserve who would like to learn more about carpentry.
We provide training to employment services for First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. We offer resume development, job search, personal one-on-one counseling.
I went there to get some safety tickets renewed, and I also got referred to Chandos. So I went in for an interview and then I was hired with Chandos, and ever since I've been loving my job here at Northwest.
And from where I am now, I accomplished a lot to forward my goal in life, which is to become a journeyman and to help out my family, my 2 daughters, and my fiance.
Anytime you can help a younger person along in their career, it is quite exciting in my books. I love to teach and I love to mentor. The program is giving us a greater opportunity to do that with some of the Indigenous staff.
So the way this gets expressed in our strategy as an organization is this idea of impact. So imagine Patagonia is going to build a $90 million office complex, 2 or 3 buildings somewhere in Canada. And so Chandos and a couple of other competitors, we get interviewed. We all roll up to the interview. There is no differentiation between contractors on the basis of cost, quality, or schedule. We're all qualified. It'll all come looking more or less the same. It'll be more or less the same schedule. There's very little differentiation there. But we roll up to that interview and we say, okay, we're going to build your building for 90 million bucks, and we're going to plow $10 million of impact spend into the local community around causes that align with your values as a customer. And we're going to demonstrate to you that we can do that at 0 premium capital cost. How do you like those apples? That's kind of how we show up. And it's been very impactful for us. We did 800 million of sales last year, 350 million of those sales. I don't think we would have won if it weren't for this sort of an approach. I asked our national sales leader to do an analysis for me. I wanted to know how much of that 350 we actually had the lowest fee on by coincidence. And he did the math, and we were low fee on 50 million of the 350. So think about that, $300 million of sales that we have as an organization. We were not the lowest fee, and we believe that we won because of our leadership around impact. So that to me is the business case for doing this for other contractors who may be sitting in the audience. I won't belabor this, but just to give you a sense of the kinds of things that you can embed in contracts, you just package it up kind of by ESG, right? So these sorts of goals are things that we talk with our customers about. Percentage embodied carbon reduction from baseline, energy use intensity reduction from the National Energy Code baseline, percentage of project design for disassembly, percentage of project value spent with impact organizations. Sorry, I get a lag here. percentage of project value spent locally, number of at-risk youth who were given a job and a career path, the percentage of project value spent with Indigenous businesses, demonstrating zero forced labor in the supply chain. Those are things that are easy to do, frankly. And all owners need to do is ask and make it clear that that's what they're expecting as part of the procurement process. The biggest governance conversation around these capital projects is the delivery method that's used. I won't belabor it today, but I will tell you that a collaborative delivery method, so CM at risk, progressive design build, integrated project delivery, even cost plus, those methods will allow you to have probably 4 or 5 times the amount of impact that you would have if you when compared to a hard bid delivery method. And there's an abundance of data that would prove that hard bid delivery methods do not deliver lowest cost or value for the taxpayer. Happy to have a conversation around that. Certainly around governance, you need to incentivize the right behavior with risk and reward tools. Pardon me, sorry, there's a lag here again. Pardon me, that's the kind of an overview of the ESG goals that you can embed in a contract. And so I'm going to switch very quickly and bring it home with an example of how we actually do this in practice. And so this is a project in Vancouver that has been in pre-construction for almost 4 years. It's about to start. And it starts out with this question around how can we maximize the positive impact of this project spending? The first question is, what does impact mean? So we got to grapple with that. The next question is, are we willing to spend more to do it? And I think it is completely acceptable for owners to say, no, I'm not willing to spend more. And my response then would be, okay, well, we will tell you how much you can get at zero premium. And so that's a really interesting conversation. So this is the job. It's 100 and some units of affordable and transitional housing. There are 3 owners: Vancouver Coastal Health, BC Housing, the City of Vancouver. This project is called First and Clark, and it's got one of the largest drug detox facilities in Canada in the podium. And so lots of complexity from stakeholders. You want to talk about NIMBYism, not in my backyard, all sorts of challenges with this project. That's part of why we're using this delivery method. And so I'm going to step through how we actually do it. And so one of the things that we did is we worked with BioSocial Canada to develop a guide to social procurement for construction projects. And one of the most important things on these projects is the contract form is the tail that wags the dog. And so this guide is broken down by the major standard contract forms used in Canada. So the CCDC 30, the CCDC 5, the CCDC 14, and the CCDC 2. So it's on the BioSocial Canada website. Go there, take a look. What I'm about to talk about is outlined in the guide. And really on this project, we adopted the City of Vancouver's goals for community benefits. And there's some kind of nuance around how you define them. But really it's 80% local spend, 10% job creation, and 10% impact spend. And so, give you a sense, 80% of the target costs for the project to be spent with local labor and local businesses. 10% of the labor hours on the project are a result of new jobs filled by members of equity-seeking groups, and 10% of the target costs for the project to be spent with community impact organizations. So sounds pretty straightforward. The rub is the definitions. What does local mean? What is an equity-seeking group, and what is an impact organization? And owners need to grapple with this. And I think, frankly, the easiest button for folks to press is to adopt Vancouver's definitions. BioSocial will be able to give you better information on this, but I expect that those definitions have been adopted by most municipalities across the country. And so for us, really to get into it, local spend, there's a way to really distill this down. So on this project, we're really saying we're going to draw a radius 100 kilometers around the job site. If the labor cost is by people who permanently live within the circle, it counts. Similar concept for materials, but we expand the radius to 300 kilometers. And if the material cost is manufactured and purchased within the circle, it counts. I will say you can get into all sorts of crazy supply chain stuff around materials. An example of that is you can buy your steel and joists through a local steel fabricator, but the joists are going to come from Omega in Winnipeg or something like that. Just to simplify it, we just said it's going to be the last link in the supply chain and just sawed it off there. So we didn't get too much complexity embedded in these analysis. These are the definitions for equity seeking groups. I'm not going to read them, but just to skip across the high points here. So women, members of indigenous communities, LGBTQ, people with disabilities, people who are unemployed, who are facing employment barriers, and people who need a second chance is a nice way to say people who are getting out of jail. And so that's the definitions around equity-seeking groups. And then in terms of impact organizations, the City of Vancouver's definitions include small and local businesses, less than 100 employees, social enterprises, organizations that take the profit or the income from their operations and plow it back into the cause, third-party certified social impact companies, B Corps, cooperatives, certified Aboriginal businesses, etc. I will say that as Shandos says, as a B Corp is really interesting for us. What we usually do on a job is we'll take our overhead, our general conditions and our fee and any self-perform work we do and count that as B Corp spend. And we'll add that to the 10% impact spend that the client's looking for. So that's an interesting dynamic. And then under equity-seeking businesses, any business that's majority owned by an equity-seeking group as defined by the previous slide. So that's what impact organizations really mean in terms of definition. And then the way we actually do this is we get our subcontractors together on the job with local impact organizations, and we basically do like a speed dating session. So this is a picture of a session we did. It was about 10 or 12 subcontractors and 20 or 30 social enterprises. This is in Vancouver, and people circulated around the room. And our subcontractors said to us, holy crap, we didn't know about this social enterprise ecosystem that exists out there. This is awesome. We're going to figure out how to embed these folks into our scopes of work, which is the whole point of the exercise. So what ends up happening is our trades go away. They think about how they can partner with the social enterprises. They come back to us and say, here's how we can do that. We capture that. And then we set goals on the project. And so we sit in a room with the client and our key trades, and we say, okay, here are the impact goals by major trade, including us as the general. And we use a software product called Nisto. We partnered with a few organizations to develop this software product. And it's basically a tool for measuring and demonstrating that we did what we said we were going to do in terms of impact. And it provides an auditable paper trail so we can demonstrate that we actually followed through. So we use that tool, and we actually embed the documentation as part of the progress claim process with our subtrades. So it's like a stat deck, basically. You got to give us the data if you're going to get paid your progress claim for that month. So a pretty robust way of making sure we capture the data. And I'm going to bring it home with kind of a reminder about what this is all about. And so this is Laura Church, who's been very public that she's on the spectrum. And we hired her through a partnership with one of our social enterprises in Vancouver. And this is a clip that happened partway through COVID. But she talks about the community and the joy that she has with her work. And I think this is really the thing that we're talking about when we talk about social procurement.
During the first part of COVID, I ended up getting sick. I don't know whether it was COVID or not, but I mean, in my own personal experience with it, and I'm probably going to tear up here, I left for a couple of days when the site shut down, and I missed an entire 2 weeks of work, and I felt so bad sitting at home, knowing that I was sick and all that, and then management comes back to me and basically tells me that, we're going to make sure to cover your expenses for not being here. And I felt so valued, and coming back on site and knowing how much everybody missed me. This company has changed my life.
So I'll just stop sharing my screen and we can open it up for Q&A.
So much. Wow, that was pretty inspirational, hey? Any questions for Tim? Okay. Over to you, Mary Lynn.
Hi there, my name is Mary Lynn Taylor, and I work in business development for several social enterprises, one being Impact Construction. So we have I don't know if you're familiar with us or not, we do some similar work to you. I have a question around recruiting and how you go about accessing the trainees that work with you and or how they find you. Like, what methods do you use to access that group of people?
Yeah, just about knocked my laptop off the table here. Sorry. So Shandos is open shop everywhere except Ontario, where we're signatory to CLAC. Now, CLAC allows us to direct hire, so there's no haul involved in anything that we do as an organization. So we direct hire, we have an HR group, and we have a network across the country of social enterprises and employment agencies. There are like literally hundreds of them. It's actually a challenge for us to stay plugged in with them all. So we tend to focus on the top three largest conduits for finding these folks in each province. Um, and our HR group works directly with them. They've got weekly calls about, I need resumes, I'm looking for these sorts of people, send me XYZ. That happens in every province. On the Indigenous side, we find that it is more effective to go direct to community, show up at the powwow with a tent and a recruiting booth, so to speak, and talk to Indigenous youth about careers in construction. So that's the approach. I would say for folks who are starting out, uh, figure out who the let's call it the organizations that specialize in placing diverse workers in the workplace. Figure out who they are and start having conversations with them.
Any other questions for Tim? Okay, hang on, Tim. Walk across the room.
Thanks, Tim. That was an excellent presentation. My question's around your B Corp certification. I'm just wondering if how that's become a part of your value proposition, and is it internally and externally as you've done this work?
Yeah. So folks will get to know me and our organization. We've got this real high need for authenticity. And so I literally stumbled across B Corp in 2013 on the internet and said to myself, man, that is awesome. That's a third party verification that you actually walk the talk. And Shannos has always been very kind of community minded, and our employment model lends it to the B Corp impact kind of metrics. And so we looked at it and we said, we can be certified without basically doing anything. And so we quietly did that in 2014, and we didn't even tell the employees. At that time, it was just so new in the Canadian landscape. So we just kind of sat on it. But as this conversation around impact business models has become more and more prevalent, B Corp has just exploded. I think there was 1,200 B Corps when we became one. There's over 4,000 now. Um, nobody knew what they were back then. And these days, about 1 in 3 of our customers do. And I can tell you that for the 1 in 3 of our customers who know what it is, they jump up and down and they want to work with us because it's like this badge of authenticity. I could give you a list of probably 10 projects that we have won because there was someone on the interview committee or the selection committee who also ran a B Corp, and the client in particular wanted to have a community impact. And we won because just solely because of that. And so I think that will become more and more part of our value proposition as we move forward.
Thanks, Tim. Any other questions for Tim? I have one if nobody has one. Tim, do you provide wraparound supports in-house for some of the individuals that are requiring a little bit more TLC?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I would say the answer is no. We part of this conversation around impact with contractors is we are not set up to do social work. It does not work for us. It's contractors at our scale. It's just something that I wouldn't even know where to start. And that's where the partnerships with the social enterprises are so important. Embers is one of our largest partners, and they provide the wraparound supports for the people that we hire through them. And so that's super valuable to me as a business leader. So I know that those supports are there and are accessible, but I don't have to build a whole organization to try to make that happen. I think that's a really excellent question.
Okay, but you do, but it's there, and that's the main thing.
It is there.
Yeah.
It is there.
Okay.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and that's really an important piece of it, for sure. Any other questions for Tim? Well, thank you very much. It's very insightful, and it's really nice to see you doing what you do, so keep it up.
Great. Nice to see you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
All right.